Here's a written image I've always loved, penned by Craig Nelson in his great book, Rocket Men, The Epic Story of the First Men on the Moon. It concerned the Apollo 11 astronauts as they were being conveyed to the launch pad. Quote, "Oxygen tubes were connected to ventilator machines which were shaped like small suitcases and which they then carried for the rest of the journey to the pad like businessmen on their way to the future." I love this quote, and I'm inspired by it. The reason I find this quote so stimulating is that it described a future that is not based on fear, but based on wonder. It's everything I love about science and everything I love about research. And it is the left ventricle of the series you're about to experience. Frank speculation about the future of work divided into 6 easily digestible pieces. I'm Dr. John Medina, a developmental molecular biologist with research interests in the genetics of psychiatric disorders. I've spent a long time thinking about behaviors and cells and genes, and I've been asked to be part of something scientists are not usually comfortable doing, looking into their crystal balls and predicting the future. The reason a neuroscientist has been called onto a forecasting journey comes from the single fundamental assumption, quote, "The future of work will involve the evidence-based world of the behavioral sciences." I agree with that quote. That's why I'm here. For a long time, business practice has ignored the world of the cognitive neurosciences, and in the future, we think that's going to change, or at least ought to change. To show where we think it's going, I've divided the easily digestible pieces into a series of 6 lectures. The first is entitled The Brain Science of Teamwork and concerns, well, the brain science of teamwork. It also serves as something of an introduction to the world of the behavioral brain sciences. Now, I realize most of you aren't neural types, but I also realize all of you have brains. So we'll talk about some brain fundamentals, then get right into the substance of the business, discussing what makes effective teams. The second lecture involves something that at first blush seems to have nothing to do with teamwork, and that is individual creativity. What we'll actually find is that whatever brain science actually thinks creativity is, or is not, there's a lot of discussion about that, by the way, fostering it has everything to do with interactions between an individual and the environment that surrounds them. That includes people. The third talk focuses on 2 terms. One you've probably never heard before, the other you've heard about so much you may be getting sick of. The first one, the strange one, is a cognitive gadget called theory of mind. It has a lot to do with group interactions and creativity, and thus the previous lectures. The other term is its interesting and quite familiar twin, empathy, which actually has formal scientific definitions and whole rafts of neurons that undergird the behavior. The fourth talk uses the information from the first 3, but dresses it up in generational clothing. We're going to talk about how to work with millennials. Actually, that's a bit of a lie. What we're really going to talk about is how brain science views generational issues. That means a big fat discussion about how time-dependent social events influence internal psychological interiors. We'll use millennials as an example of this. The 5th lecture concerns the one cognitive gadget in this series that really sounds businessy or businesslike. It's called executive function, though it has very little to do with how business schools describe managerial behavior. Executive function is an actual suite of behaviors governed by well-characterized neurological substrates and whose job description is surprisingly simple. It's the ability to get things done. It's the same gadget that causes you to be a wizard at spreadsheets while at the same time choosing not to punch your boss in the nose if you get a bad performance review. The last lecture concerns a category that is so broad it almost doesn't function as a category. I'm talking about artificial intelligence. I will approach this subject the only way I can from the perspective of a brain scientist, looking at how other scientists try to create artificial simulations of brain function. Spoiler alert, they've not been particularly successful. We'll do our best to separate the hype from the actual, the myth from the mainframe, the pie-in-the-sky promise from the pie-in-the-face reality, and then we'll be finished. Hopefully, the joy of the wonder will unseat the fear of the future. The human brain is one of the most fascinating subjects in any research discipline. The one organ so powerful it is capable of studying itself, a fact which, after all these decades of research, still blows me away. That we can put wheels, engines, and chassis on some of these findings, then make them run on practical highways is clear to me, as long as we're careful to stay in evidence-based lanes. It's a worthy journey as we pack up the peer review into our satchels and drive towards a brain-based perspective, like business professionals on the way to the future.